Well, let me ask the next question then to Ben. In your remarks this morning, I think everybody knows you're an eternal optimist, and yet you're a little bit skeptical about the compromises that were just described. Do you think Kampala represents more of an incremental process toward something that you'd like to see, or more of a smokescreen?
It's both. Let me see if I can clarify a bit the point which Bill started with. In connection with the crime of aggression, it is different from the other crimes because no individual can commit aggression. Aggression has to be a concern to the international community as a whole, has to be a massive and the illustrated invasion, attack, and so on. No single individual can commit that crime. On the other hand, a state cannot commit a crime either. It's not a human body. In Nuremberg, you can't take a state and lock it up. A state has to be judged to see whether it has done an act which is a violation of the UN Charter and therefore is illegal to justify certain restraints or sanctions. It's similar to a policeman arresting somebody first, bringing them to the district attorney, having the district attorney examine the evidence, he would need more investigation, going through a jury of some kind before it's submitted to the court. The big complaint always was that you have to be sure that the court is independent. Of course the court has to be independent, but it doesn't mean that every time a policeman arrests somebody, or every time a district attorney examines the evidence, or every time we go to a grand jury, these are interfering with the independence of the court. In connection with an act of aggression, which can only be committed by a state, who determines that it's a legal violation of the Charter? Shall it be 18 judges elected as criminal experts, or will it be the politicians who sit in the Security Council and have been charged with the UN, in the UN Charter, to do that job? That's their job. It's the job of the Security Council to determine the existence of an act of aggression, a crime, an act of aggression, and then decide what is necessary to maintain peace. If you keep those two things separate, a crime committed by an individual as a leader who directs the troops to go in and bomb the country or whatever, and a violation of the UN Charter by a state, you have to have both of them. Just as you must have an arrest by a policeman before you can take it to court. That doesn't make the court dependent upon the police department. There may be policemen who are crooked or are stupid or whatever. It doesn't affect the action of the court. So I think what Phil was trying to explain was this dispute between an act of aggression and a crime of aggression, which is quite confusing to most people, and I must say, I criticize myself after Kampala for not having made that sufficiently clear to governments, that it's not really an infringement on the independence of the ICC to allow the Security Council to determine whether the actions by a state are a violation of the UN Charter. In fact, it's required. The UN Charter is the agreement reached by all nations, all member states, to be bound by those procedures. If an act occurs of violence, use of armed force, and it's in violation of the Charter, the Security Council will determine whether it is a violation or not. Maybe it was the kind of humanitarian intervention which was referred to in connection with the conflict that you started off. So I think if you bear in mind those two separate functions, each one is necessary for a conviction. If you haven't proved that the crime has occurred, you cannot convict anybody. You have a whole row of prosecutors there. The first question is, did the crime occur? That's not for them to determine. That's for, as far as the use of armed force illegally, that's for the Security Council to determine. Now, I know everybody hates the Security Council because they have failed miserably to do their job. They were supposed to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war. Have they done it? I'd give them an F. Flunk them out. They haven't done it at all, for reasons which we know. Cold War, and so on. Sovereignty, sanctity of, independent judgments and so on. So, the Security Council, everybody hates the Security Council. And when they hear Security Council involvement, no, it affects the independence of the court. Not so. Not so. On the contrary.
Except then, if you only left it with the council.
We don't leave it only to the council. The council has no authority
The
except...
5 permanent members and anyone they're protecting would never be subject
Just a moment. This council is charged with responsibility under the charter not to determine the guilt of anyone. They are not qualified to do that. They are not expected to do that. They are there to determine whether the use of armed force has been in a manner prohibited by the terms of the UN Charter, and if so, what action will be taken by the Security Council in response thereto. They may decide to refer to a court for punishment of the main perpetrator, that they may do. But these are two separate and distinct functions. Let me go on to illustrate the Kosovo situation. So this is something which, if properly understood, I think some of the animus about the Security Council, which we all hate, we all agree we all hate the Security Council. Well, who loves it? But I don't know. I think they're doing their job, and I think it's a shame. But that's the way the world is set up, and we try to improve it. And we'll get to it in due course. But let's take your basic question is, is it eyewash or is it progress? Is that what you're asking me?
Is it a whitewash of progress?
Is it eyewash or is it progress? What do you make of it? And it's both. It's both. The manifest violation, which you refer to as one of the compromises, I think that's pure eyewash. The Rome statute provided, based on Resolution 3314, the resolution in 1974, which after about 20 years, building on the previous 30 years of definition, was a consensus definition of the crime of aggression. That's what that was all about. Now, at the last minute, they couldn't get agreement on it. Somebody, and I know who it was my friend Bob Rosenstock, now deceased, who said, hey, look, we can't reach agreement. We've been working on this thing for 29 years. Everybody's getting tired of it. Let's do this. Let's say it's only advisory. It's advisory to the Security Council. Then advisory, you don't have to pay attention. It has no binding effect. Okay, that was a compromise. Make it advisory to the Security Council. That was not the purpose of 29 years of work. The assignment by the First General Assembly of the United Nations was to build on the Nuremberg principles, create a code of crimes against peace and security of mankind, and start building an international criminal court to enforce that code. That was the assignment in Resolution 29, the first assembly of the General Assembly after the World War II. And in the end, they switched it out. So you're talking about hocus pocus, I'm showing you how the game is played.